The first crack in the night came from a champagne flute hitting Italian marble. At the Jade River Gala, every crystal light above the dining room glowed soft as moonwater. Every white orchid smelled expensive, and every pair of eyes followed Imani Brooks as if she had wandered into a room built to reject her. The silk of her bronze gown skimmed over a hidden 7-month pregnancy, elegant enough for donors, dangerous enough for enemies, and still the whispers found her. Kitchen girl. Visa wife. Wrong colour in the wrong dynasty. Imani stood at the head table anyway, spine straight, one hand resting over the life shifting beneath her ribs. Across the room, Kang Min-jae moved through politicians and investors with that terrifying stillness that made grown men lower their voices. His tuxedo was midnight black, his face unreadable, his power quieter than gunmetal. He had married her in secret 3 weeks earlier. The ring sat warm beneath her glove. The black silk bracelet with 3 tiny gold bells rested against her pulse, hidden from everyone except him. Then Chairwoman Kang rose. "Such a pity," Min-jae's mother said, lifting her glass, "when staff forget their place." The room went silent. 2 immigration officers stepped through the parted crowd. Their shoes clicked. Their expressions did not change. "Imani Brooks," one said. "Residency revoked. Deportation order effective immediately." Gasps rippled across the tables. Someone laughed too softly. Someone else looked relieved. Imani took the paper and her heart stopped for one clean, icy second. Stamped at the bottom was the Kang family private seal. Min-jae turned at the exact moment her world split open. What terrified her most was not the order in her hand, but the question burning beneath it. The airport smelled of bleach, recirculated air, and panic. Imani did not beg. She memorized names, cufflinks, the scratch on the officer's watch, the flight number, the way Chairwoman Kang's assistant stood too close to the gate with a satisfied mouth. Every contraction that tightened under her ribs felt like a warning shot from fate itself. By the time the plane landed in Los Angeles, blood had soaked the edge of her dress, and the bells on her bracelet had cut faint red half-moons into her wrist. The hospital where they took her had buzzing lights, thin blankets, and no room for pride, but pride came anyway. She delivered 3 babies through pain so bright it turned the room white. One girl with a crescent birthmark beneath her ear. One boy with Min-jae's deep dimple. One girl who curled one fist tight against her chest as if she already knew the world could steal. A nurse with kind, tired eyes cut the bracelet from Imani's wrist when swelling set in. During a brief power flicker in the neonatal ward, the nurse tied one tiny gold bell to each infant's identification band so the triplets would never be mixed apart in the chaos. 3 bells, 3 children, 1 promise. Then the Kang family attorney arrived. He carried polished manners, emergency guardianship papers, and a lie wrapped in velvet. He told the nurses the father had authority. He told the hospital the mother needed rest. By the time Imani fought through the medication haze, the bassinets were empty. Across the ocean, Min-jae received a forged letter in Imani's handwriting. It said the babies belonged to his world, and she never wanted to see any of them again. He read it once, then folded into a silence colder than winter steel. When the attorney placed 3 infants in his arms at the hidden nursery above the Kang residence, Min-jae did not break. He only sat through the night in a room washed silver by city light, feeding each child with careful hands while grief hardened into something far more dangerous. 9 months later, Imani found the attorney's face on a charity brochure from Seoul. Chicago gave Imani room to rebuild without asking permission. She rented 2 rooms above her aunt's old flower shop, painted the kitchen walls cream, and turned pain into work with the same discipline that once made the Jade River kitchen run like music. Her supper club became impossible to ignore. Roasted garlic, brown butter, and slow-braised short ribs drifted into the street every Friday night. Her guests included journalists, immigration advocates, and one retired private investigator who knew how rich families buried scandals beneath good tailoring. Imani never said she was searching for children. She only slid documents across the table and kept her voice level. The deportation order, the hospital transfer form, the brochure with the attorney smiling beside Chairwoman Kang under a headline about family legacy. Then a bank transfer surfaced, then a sealed flight manifest, then an address in Seoul attached to a private nursery supply account. She landed in Seoul on a grey morning that smelled like rain and diesel, carrying a carry-on bag, a file thick with proof, and a dignity that no one had managed to deport. The humble pension she chose had creaking stairs and paper-thin walls, but the old woman at the desk bowed to her with more respect than the Kang family ever had in public. Across the river, Min-jae lived a double life inside his own empire. By day, he handled board votes, smuggling routes he never discussed in detail, and rivals who understood consequences the moment his expression went still. By night, he warmed bottles, learned lullabies from recordings, and wore baby spit-up on shirts tailored in Milan. The triplets knew his scent, his footsteps, the low hum in his chest when he held them after nightmares. He never let a single camera near them. At a flower market near Bukchon, Imani heard it before she saw the vehicle. A faint, impossible chime. 3 tiny gold bells. When the black SUV door opened, Min-jae stepped out with an infant balanced on one arm, and 2 more carriers followed behind him. Imani saw the crescent birthmark first. The founder's dinner at the Kang Grand Hotel looked built from gold leaf and old arrogance. Min-jae had not been told his mother planned an announcement. That omission alone told him the night had teeth. Politicians filled the ballroom. Society women glittered under chandeliers. Investors drank pear soju from crystal coupes and discussed succession as if family were another asset line. Then Chairwoman Kang rose with a smile sharp enough to skin truth. "Our house endured a season of unfortunate confusion," she said. "Tonight, that uncertainty ends. Kang blood continues." 3 nannies entered carrying the babies. Shock moved through the room in a visible wave. Phones lifted. Whispers cracked open like dry wood. Min-jae stood so still he looked carved from obsidian. Then the ballroom doors opened again. Imani walked in wearing a cream suit that turned every head in the room and did not lower her chin for a single soul. The staff moved toward her, but she kept walking over marble and reflected light, through the scent of peonies and perfume and old prejudice, until she stood at the center of the room where Chairwoman Kang wanted her smallest. "That woman has no place here," one director muttered. Imani looked at the nearest nanny, then at the children. "Sora," she said softly, and the baby with the crescent mark turned toward her voice. The room froze. "June," she said next, and the boy's dimple appeared exactly where it had the night he was born. "Mina." The smallest girl opened her fist. Imani reached down and touched the tiny anklet bell tied above the child's sock. Her breath shook only once. Those bells came from a black silk wedding bracelet cut in an emergency ward during a power flicker in Los Angeles. No stranger could know that. Chairwoman Kang's smile faltered. Min-jae's eyes went dark with revelation. Every person in the ballroom understood, at the same brutal moment, that the woman they had dismissed had just broken the room in half. The nursery above the eastern wing smelled of warm milk, cedarwood, and the faint lavender oil the nannies used at bedtime. Imani stood among moon-coloured walls and shelves filled with hand-carved animals, fury mixing with wonder so sharply it almost made her dizzy. Her children were here, fed, clothed, protected, hidden. Min-jae dismissed every guard and every nanny with a glance. When the door shut, silence settled between them, dense and living. He remained several feet away. "That order carried the family seal," Imani said. "Min-jae signed nothing," he answered. "That letter claimed abandonment. Min-jae believed the letter because blood trusted blood, and blood lied. The admission landed heavier than any excuse could have. He showed her the paper, unfolded so many times the edges had gone soft. Her forged signature looked almost convincing. Then he opened a drawer and took out a stained recipe card. Sweet potato porridge with cinnamon. Mina slept only with that scent nearby, he said. Kitchen staff failed. Min-jae learned. The words were simple. The ache inside them was not. Imani crossed to the crib and laid a finger against Sora's cheek. Her voice came low and steady. Recovery woke in a hospital with empty bassinets. Recovery buried shame under work because grief without action would have killed more than hope. Min-jae's throat moved once. A thin scar cut through one brow, pale against his skin. This house failed you. Those children will never be used against you again. Neither will Min-jae. He did not reach for her, did not crowd her, did not demand forgiveness from the woman who had been forced to earn back her own life. That restraint hurt almost more than touch would have. When Mina stirred, both of them moved at the same time, and their hands nearly met above the crib. The boardroom on the 42nd floor had floor-to-ceiling glass, imported walnut walls, and the brittle mood of men about to witness history. Chairwoman Kang arrived dressed in pearl silk, as immaculate as a lie, told often enough to feel like etiquette. Several older directors watched Imani with the same contempt they reserved for storms and outsiders. Their disdain only sharpened her focus. One director cleared his throat. A foreign scandal cannot sit near succession. Before Imani could answer, the doors opened. Min-jae entered carrying June on one arm. The room stood on reflex. He walked to the head of the table, placed the child in a secured seat beside him, then laid a folder of signed legal orders on polished wood with a sound like a blade being set down. When he spoke, his voice barely rose, and every man in the room leaned in out of fear. Any person who calls Kang Min-jae's wife a guest will leave without shares, security, or access to family holdings. No one moved. He turned slightly. Seat. Imani took the chair at his right hand. That was the first time the board truly saw her. Not as staff, not as ornament, not as the black woman they could isolate and erase, as the mother of the heirs, the legal wife, and the only person in the room whose dignity had survived all of them. Independent DNA testing was ordered through 3 outside labs. Signature authority was stripped from Chairwoman Kang pending investigation. The attorney from Los Angeles was named in an international fraud complaint before the meeting ended. Yet power did not surrender without venom. Just before dawn, an envelope appeared outside Imani's suite. Inside lay old authorization pages signed years earlier by Min-jae, blank forms once entrusted to family administration. Chairwoman Kang had used them to build the deportation order, and Min-jae had never told her those signatures existed. The mansion offered everything except peace. Silk bedding, armed guards, nursery monitors, art worth more than entire neighborhoods. None of it changed the fact that a mission had helped destroy her life. Min-jae had not forged the trap, but he had built the careless door through which it entered. So Imani left. She rented a hanok above a florist's courtyard, where rain tapped softly on curved roof tiles, and the air held the scent of wet earth, stems, and old pine. The kitchen was narrow, the floors warmed her bare feet, and every item inside the house belonged to her decision. She filed legal papers in her own name. She hired her own counsel. She made visitation terms for the triplets that did not depend on Kang mercy. When Min-jae appeared one evening, rain darkening his coat, he did not cross the threshold. He held a steel container of seaweed soup still warm, a postpartum meal, a missing ritual, a quiet apology. Silence protected the wrong people, he said. Imani looked at him through the doorway lantern light. Silence always protects the wrong people. His expression did not change, but grief moved behind it like deep water. Father taught sons that softness invited enemies. That lesson built an empire and buried a marriage. The truth of it made her chest ache. She could have stayed inside his wealth, inside his protection, inside the version of the story where love meant endurance without standards. Instead, she chose herself with both hands. Not because love was gone, but because love without truth had already taken too much. She accepted the soup. She did not invite him in. The next morning, the first DNA result hit the press before it reached the family. The charity gala where the leak exploded was hosted in the same restaurant where her humiliation had begun. Jade River still smelled of polished wood, citrus peel, and expensive disdain. The chandeliers still spilled honeyed light over white tablecloths. The difference now was that people stood when Imani entered. Rival prosecutor Han Do-won had timed the release perfectly. According to the falsified report circulating across every screen in Seoul, the triplets shared Kang DNA, but not maternal DNA with Imani. The implication was brutal: surrogate child, fraud claim, unstable foreign wife, inheritance protected by removing her again. Chairwoman Kang sat at the center table in winter white silk, pretending serenity. Han stood nearby with the self-satisfied posture of a man who believed paperwork mattered more than truth. Then Imani walked to the front beside an American nurse with tired, kind eyes and a hospital archivist carrying sealed files. The room shifted. The nurse testified first. She described the emergency delivery, the blackout flicker, the black silk bracelet cut from Imani's wrist, and the 3 tiny bells attached to the infant's bands so no one could separate them in the confusion. The archivist produced time-stamped neonatal photographs. Imani held up the enlarged image. 3 infants, 3 tags, 3 bells. A murmur rolled through the room. Han objected. Chairwoman Kang smiled too quickly. Sentiment proves nothing. Min-jae stepped forward then, not loud, not frantic, only devastatingly calm. He placed the actual anklets on the velvet display before the donors and directors. Each bell bore the engraved date of the birth and the emergency ward code. The room broke against the truth, yet Han still lifted the false DNA file with a smug little flourish. Without the original deportation order and transfer authorization, this remains a family drama. Imani looked toward Chairwoman Kang and saw for the first time fear. Somewhere in that house of lies, the final document still existed. The ancestral hall above the private garden had always smelled like lacquered wood, incense, and obedience. That was where Chairwoman Kang kept the objects she valued most: old ledgers, her husband's portrait, sealed family records, and the illusion that lineage gave her the right to decide who counted as human. When security brought her there under Min-jae's direct order, rage finally cracked her perfect composure. "Everything done was for legacy," she spat. "No," Imani said, stepping into the hall beside him. "Everything done was for control." Min-jae had already found the hidden compartment behind the memorial screen. Inside sat the original deportation order, the transfer papers from Los Angeles, and payment records tying Han Do-won to the attorney who removed the babies. The chain was clean now. Fraud, coercion, conspiracy, enough for public ruin and prison besides. Chairwoman Kang lunged for the documents, but one small sound stopped the room. Chime. Mina had wandered in with a nanny at the threshold. Tiny hand wrapped around the black silk bracelet clasp Min-jae had preserved in his safe. The child had found it earlier that day and refused to release it. The bells sang once in her fist, soft and unmistakable. When the bells ring, home answers. The phrase landed like judgment. Imani knelt and opened Mina's fingers. The clasp still held the jeweler's inscription from their wedding date, and beside it the micro-engraved repair note from the Los Angeles hospital where the bracelet had been cut. The final link. The last bridge between the gala, the birth, and the theft. Chairwoman Kang saw the game end in real time. Han was arrested before dawn. The attorney in Los Angeles turned state witness within 48 hours. Chairwoman Kang lost her title, her board power, and every legal shield her money once bought. This time, there was no polished room left to hide her cruelty. But after the authorities left and the hall fell quiet, only one truth still mattered between the woman who had been stolen from and the man who had failed to see the theft in time. Min-jae chose the same room where everything had begun. Jade River had been cleared of donors, directors, and spectators. No cameras remained. No hostile eyes waited to measure Imani against their prejudice. The only light came from candle pools trembling across polished wood, and the only sound was the faraway city mixed with 3 sleeping babies on the floor above, watched by nannies she herself had approved. Imani stood near the long window overlooking Seoul. Min-jae stopped several feet behind her, the distance deliberate. No excuse remains. No, she said. He bowed his head, not as a chairman, not as a boss, but as a man stripped of every shield worth losing. Protection came late. Trust came later. That failure belongs to Min-jae alone. The words settled into the quiet like something clean at last. He placed a folder on the table beside her. New marriage registration, independent family trust in the children's names, shared authority, her own property deed already signed over with no conditions attached. No cage, he said. No hidden doors. Choice only. Imani looked at the papers, then at him. The ruthless calm that terrified enemies was still there, but so was the man who had learned porridge for a sleepless daughter, carried a baby into a boardroom, and burned his own house down to reach the truth. Love without dignity had no future, she said. His answer came without hesitation. Then dignity first. For the first time in nearly a year, she walked toward him without anger leading the way. Not surrender, not forgetting. A decision made with eyes open. When her hand reached his, both of them understood the real ceremony had not been the secret wedding, or the board declaration, or the legal papers waiting on the table. It would be whatever came next. Spring softened the Kang house. The nursery windows stayed open to lilac air. Imani's new restaurant occupied the first floor of a restored building near the river, where butter hissed in copper pans and sesame, garlic, and warm yeast drifted through rooms built to welcome rather than judge. The triplets spent mornings there in a sunlit play corner, guarded by discreet security and half the kitchen's staff who adored them beyond reason. Sora walked first. June learned how to charm 3 extra strawberries from the pastry chef. Mina kept the bracelet bells in a glass box by the family altar and shook them whenever she wanted both parents in the same room. When the bells ring, home answers. That became law in the gentlest way. Min-jae still carried danger in the stillness of his body, still made rivals reconsider life choices with a glance, still ran his empire with precise hands and colder standards. But in private he folded laundry badly, let the babies chew his cufflinks, and asked permission before every touch that mattered. Sometimes he stood in the restaurant doorway after closing, watching Imani wipe down her counters under warm pendant light, and his expression held the kind of reverence power could never buy. One evening, after service, he brought her a bowl of seaweed soup and set it beside her ledger. Late but earned, he said. Imani smiled, slow and real. Closer. Upstairs, Mina called out her first clear word. Ioma, mother. Imani turned before the second syllable faded. Min-jae reached the stairs at the same moment, and for once neither of them arrived too late. The bells chimed softly as all 5 of them came together, and this time nothing in the world could take that sound away.